Here are the headlines for Tuesday morning, September 3, 2024. How I got fired from the Central Intelligence Agency, career operations officer tells all. Several whistleblowers from the American intelligence community have gained notoriety for exposing state secrets, including Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, John Kiriakou, John Stockwell, William Binney, and Thomas Drake. However, there are many more former employees of the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, and other agencies who were abruptly fired or dismissed for questioning foreign policy actions, but remain largely unknown due to fear of retribution and prosecution. The American public often only finds out about major covert operations or war plans long after they have occurred, such as the invasion of Iraq and the CIA's covert program to overthrow Syria's Assad. Customers are falling out of love with Airbnb. Airbnb is facing challenges as the number of fees for booking rentals rises, leading some consumers to question whether it's better to book a hotel instead. Travel site founder Michael Rosenblit has expressed dissatisfaction with Airbnb, citing high cleaning fees and uncooperative hosts who no longer provide basics like toilet paper and trash bags. According to a report from AOL Insider, many travelers have noticed that Airbnb rentals are now pricier than hotels and offer less value, leading to frustration over high fees and poor customer service. The hotel industry is seeing a resurgence, with some achieving pre-pandemic occupancy levels, and is projected to grow 3.72% annually, reaching $511 billion by 2029. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., there has to be a reckoning for immoral, homicidal CEO VID criminality. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said individuals who engaged in criminal behavior during the pandemic still need to be held accountable, citing Anthony Fauci as an example of someone who used their position to enforce totalitarian controls that were not science-based. He argued that effective treatments like ivermectin were repressed and that millions of people died unnecessarily due to pressure from Fauci and others to push unproven vaccine. Kennedy also claimed that myocarditis cases among young people, particularly athletes, increased dramatically after vaccination. The United States seizes Venezuelan President Maduro's plane, flies it to Florida. The United States government has seized President Nicolas Maduro's airplane, a Dassault Falcon 900 valued at $13 million, due to allegations that its acquisition violated U.S. sanctions. The plane was confiscated in the Dominican Republic, where it had been for several months, and flown to Florida by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. This move was seen as an escalation of Washington's actions against Venezuela and a message from the Biden administration that no one is above the law or beyond the reach of U.S. sanctions. German elites call for firewall to prevent conservative governance after alternative for Germany election win. The coalition system of government in European nations is designed to prevent authoritarian regimes by diluting power among multiple parties, but it has allowed for increasing socialist control under progressive and globalist politicians. Most parties do not represent the public's will, instead colluding to form bureaucratic cartels that exclude conservatives from the process. In Germany, the conservative AfD party, labeled as right-wing extremists by German intelligence, won a significant victory in the state of Thuringia and came close second in Saxony, largely supported by younger voters who are tired of the socialist status quo. National Aeronautics and Space Administration astronaut says strange noise emitting from troubled Boeing Starliner docked at International Space Station. Boeing's troubled Starliner spacecraft has been experiencing technical issues, including multiple helium leaks and malfunctioning reaction control systems, prompting an ASA administrator, Bill Nelson, to tap SpaceX for assistance. On Saturday, astronaut Butch Wilmore reported strange noises coming from a speaker inside the spacecraft, which sounded like pulsing noise, almost like a sonar ping. The issue is concerning, especially with the Starliner scheduled to return to Earth on Friday in an uncrewed flight, leaving astronauts Wilmore and Sunita Williams stranded on the International Space Station. Putin declares Kursk gambit failed as Ukraine's army steamrolled in the east. Russian President Vladimir Putin used his visit to Mongolia to defy the West, particularly the International Criminal Court, which has called for his arrest. In remarks to students before traveling to Mongolia, Putin focused on progress in Ukraine's Donbass region, stating that Russian armed forces are taking control of territories at a rapid pace. He emphasized that Kiev is doomed to failure in its cross-border attacks and will eventually be forced to negotiate. Putin also claimed that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has no interest in ending the fighting due to his low chances of re-election. Meanwhile, Ukraine launched over 150 drones against Russia on Sunday, striking several oil and gas facilities. Persistent economic pressures, changing consumer habits send more restaurants into bankruptcy. The restaurant industry is experiencing significant challenges, with many chains filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy due to rising costs from inflation and changing consumer habits. According to Jonathan Carson, co-CEO of Stretto, 17 national restaurant chains have filed for bankruptcy in 2024. Experts attribute the decline to increased competition from home delivery services like Uber Eats, Grubhub, and DoorDash, which take large commissions from restaurants. To survive, restaurants must offer something unique to make consumers leave their homes, such as Red Lobster, which is struggling to stay afloat despite its well-known brand. An outlaw, Brazil's full Supreme Court upholds Darth Vader ban on Elon Musk's X. Brazil's Supreme Federal Court has upheld a countrywide ban and fines on Elon Musk's X social media platform for not complying with local regulations, citing the company's failure to present a legal representative in Brazil as required by law. The court imposed a daily fine of $8,900 on individuals or firms who attempt to circumvent the ban using a virtual private network or other means. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Supreme Court Chief Justice Luis Roberto Barroso have publicly supported the decision, while critics argue that the ban and fines are overboard and may infringe upon citizens' right to free speech. D.C. Court cancels 3 approved liquefied natural gas projects over environmental justice. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has vacated the approval of 3 liquefied natural gas export terminal and related pipeline projects at the Port of Brownsville, effectively canceling prior approval by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The court upheld arguments that FERC failed to adequately consider environmental justice impacts and greenhouse gas emissions as required by the National Environmental Policy Act and the Natural Gas Act. This decision will require a new draft, supplemental environmental impact statements and public comment period before FERC decides whether to issue new project permits, which can take an average of 4.5 years, according to Wikipedia. Volkswagen considers first-ever Germany factory closures as economic troubles mount. Volkswagen is considering unprecedented factory closures in Germany due to falling profits caused by slowing sales in China and other major markets. The company's economic environment has become tougher, and new players are pushing into Europe. Any shutdowns would mark the first closures in Germany during Volkswagen's 87-year history, setting the company up for a clash with powerful union. Volkswagen deliveries in China were down 20% amid a broader decline in petrol-powered vehicles in the second quarter. Meanwhile, the company has announced a €1 billion investment in electric vehicle projects in Mexico, sparking concerns that Audi could start moving electric vehicle production to Mexico. Record anti-Netanyahu protests. Labor strikes bring Israel to a standstill. A massive protest in Tel Aviv, Israel, drew an estimated 300,000 to 750,000 people overnight, with more expected Monday following the recovery of the bodies of 6 Israeli hostages held in a Gaza's tunnel. Protesters accused Prime Minister Netanyahu of intentionally stalling and thwarting a hostage swap deal with Hamas, prioritizing the military operation instead, which could put some 100 remaining captives in harm's way. The protest was reportedly the largest rally since the war began, with demonstrators calling for a new government and an end to the conflict. Kremlin spokesman suggests Moscow prefers Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. The Kremlin now appears to favor Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in the presidential election, stating that the Democrats are more predictable. This is not the first time Russia has expressed a preference for a Democratic candidate, as Vladimir Putin previously indicated he preferred Joe Biden over Trump before Biden was forced out of the race. Nuclear fusion, a perpetually distant dream, moves closer to reality. Scientists have been working to develop nuclear fusion reactions that can generate electricity since the 1950s, when physicist Lyman Spitzer invented the tokamak device to contain and heat plasmas to incredibly high temperatures. The process involves heating a gas called plasma to 100 million degrees centigrade, at which point the nuclei of deuterium and tritium atoms fuse together, releasing energy that can be captured by a blanket outside the wall, and ultimately generate electricity. Over the decades since its invention, scientists have worked to develop ever stronger magnets to generate more energy for longer durations, with various countries operating their own tokamaks, including Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratories Tokamak Fusion Test Reactor in the United States, the Joint European Tourist in England, and the Experimental Advanced Superconducting Takankan. Kamala Harris is but a cog in the Democrats' machine. The Democratic Party is no longer driven by decisive leaders who guide the nation, but instead by a vast machine of unelected bureaucrats, academics, and media voices sharing a left-wing ideology. Kamala Harris is not a visionary leader, but rather an empty vessel for Democrat marketing strategies to fill with slogans. Her lack of insight and conviction makes her unlikely to offer pushback to the party's plan. As president, she would continue to ramp up left-wing policies that have marked Joe Biden's term, including higher taxes, expanded regulation, mounting national debt, and efforts to censor dissenting views. A quarrel in a faraway land? Inflation in the United States slowed slightly in July, with year-on-year price growth at 2.6%, down from expectations of 2.7%. However, household finances may be under strain as personal spending outpaced income for another month, leading to concerns about rising credit card balances and delinquency rates. The Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates soon, possibly by 50 basis points due to weakening consumer demand and a slowing economy. Markets are also watching labor market data closely, with the upcoming non-farm payrolls report likely to be volatile. Shares of United States Steel slide after Vice President Harris opposes Nippon's $15 billion buyout deal. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris visited Pittsburgh on Labor Day, declaring that the United Steel Company should remain domestically owned and operated. She stated that it is vital for the nation to maintain strong American steel companies, echoing President Biden's sentiments. Harris' comments were made during a visit to Pennsylvania, a critical battleground state, where she is attempting to shore up support among blue-collar workers ahead of the November election. Her stance on the issue is also identical to Republican nominee Donald Trump's, who has vowed to block the proposed $15 billion acquisition of United States Steel by Japan's Nippon Steel Company. American workers talk about what drives them. Labor Day in the United States celebrates workers' contributions to society, but some argue that it also perpetuates negative stereotypes about blue-collar jobs being unskilled or low-paying. Despite these misconceptions, many blue-collar workers take pride in their physically demanding work and earn good salaries as a result of their skills and hard work. In fact, salaries for blue-collar vocations are rising because fewer people are willing to do such work, making it more valuable. One tree trimmer, John Dougherty, earns 6 figures by doing work he loves, while also acknowledging that education matters even in blue-collar job. Meanwhile, a single mother and server, Jenna Rivera, uses her multiple jobs as opportunities to network and earn extra income to support her family. Book publishers sue Florida over law banning sexually explicit books from schools. A group of book publishers and authors have filed a lawsuit against the state of Florida over its law banning sexually explicit books from school libraries in the state. The plaintiffs, including Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, Macmillan Publishing Group, and Hachette Book Group, claim that the law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis is a violation of both the First and 14th Amendments. They argue that the law interferes with their ability to produce and distribute constitutionally protected books and is too vague in its description of sexual conduct. The lawsuit demands that certain parts of the law be ruled unconstitutional, but does not specify any particular examples of books that should be allowed under the law. 5 things to know about Labor Day. A national Labor Day holiday in the United States was first proposed by Senator James Henderson Kyle in 1884. The celebration originated from an event held on September 5, 1882, which was later commemorated as Labor Day. President Grover Cleveland declared Labor Day a federal holiday in 1894 after signing legislation introduced by Senator Kyle, who was regarded as the father of the formal celebration. Cleveland's decision to enforce the injunction against a railroad workers' strike in Chicago led to backlash and unpopular policies during his term. The village of Cedarville, Ohio, where Senator Kyle was born, celebrates Labor Day each year with a community festival called Cedar Fest and recognizes Kyle as the father of Labor Day. Kamala Harris will not bring prices down. Her plan needs inflation. Kamala Harris claimed that Bidenomics is working and inflation is decreasing, despite the Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting an annual inflation rate of 2.9%, up from 1.4% when she took office. The Biden-Harris administration has accumulated over 20% in inflation since January 2021, with Democrats blaming external factors like war and pandemics for price increase. However, Harris also blames greedy grocery stores and corporations for inflation, contradicting her earlier statement taking credit for lowering inflation rates. In reality, the Kamala Harris plan promotes inflation as a means to disguise government spending, transfer wealth from citizens to the government, and maintain control through subsidies. The Biden-Harris administration has created over $35 trillion in public debt and is projected to add an additional $16.3 trillion by 2024, making it essential for Harris to perpetuate inflation to hide the true extent of their spending. Hungary is first central bank to pause rate cuts as inflation suddenly jumps. The Federal Reserve is poised to cut interest rates for the first time since March 2020 in 2 weeks, but it is already behind the curve compared to other major central banks that have made multiple rate cuts. The Hungarian central bank has paused its easing cycle after 15 consecutive rate cuts due to rising inflation and a weakening currency, and may need to hike rates again soon. Despite Hungary's politicians criticizing the central bank for prioritizing price stability over economic growth, policymakers are focused on avoiding hyperinflation and currency collapse. Supermicro anticipates no material changes in 2024 Form 10-K after delay and Hindenburg short report. Super Microcomputer, which was among the biggest beneficiaries of the artificial intelligence euphoria over the past 2 years, wrote in a filing on Friday that its delayed 2024 Form 10-K will not contain material changes to results from its fiscal year and quarter ended June 30th, which were reported in early August. The company shares have plunged as much as 36% since the dismal earnings report on August 6th, with shares peaking around $1,118 in mid-March and tumbling into a nasty bear market of 63% since then. Into the final stretch of the year, here are the 10 most important tech narratives according to Goldman's top tech trader. As the summer ends and the year enters its final stretch, Goldman's top tech trader Peter Callahan identifies 10 key storylines that technology, media, and telecommunications investors need to consider in the last 4 months of the year. The Nasdaq is up 16% on the year, although it has tracked down around 1% through the first 2 months of the third quarter, indicating a less directional trend in the sector. Callahan notes that the previous week was significant for tech investors, with all eyes on Nvidia's earnings and price action, which largely supported the view that the generative artificial intelligence theme is becoming more nuanced. United Kingdom announces partial ban on arms exports to Israel. The United Kingdom has suspended 30 of its 350 arms export licenses to Israel due to a clear risk that the supplies could be used in the current conflict in Gaza against Hamas, potentially violating international humanitarian law. The decision was made by Foreign Secretary David Lammy after conducting a review of shipments to Israel, and it is not expected to have a significant impact on Israel's operations, given that British exports make up less than 1% of total external arms sales Israel receive. Futures slide as United States returns from holiday and data deluge looms. The United States presidential election is 9 weeks away, and current polls indicate a very tight race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, with Harris having a 57% chance of winning and Trump at 43%. A recent note from the European economics team discusses the potential economic impact of a second Trump presidency on the European Union and the United Kingdom, particularly in regards to trade wars. In other news, the far-right Alternative for Germany party won a state election in Thuringia, but is unlikely to enter government due to opposition from other parties. Asian equity markets are trading in a narrow range, and data releases today include the Institute for Supply Management Manufacturing print for August from the United States. China's expanding illicit drug networks raise challenges for United States policy. The Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party is criticizing the Biden administration's efforts to work with China to combat the fentanyl crisis, which has caused hundreds of thousands of American deaths. The committee claims that the Chinese government is not taking enforcement action against perpetrators responsible for exporting fentanyl and its precursors, despite offering tax subsidies and grants to companies engaged in their manufacture. Republican lawmakers are calling for stricter trade and customs enforcement measures, with some suggesting that China's communist regime is largely to blame for the crisis. The White House has not commented on the issue, while Democrat lawmakers have been largely silent on the matter. Goldman going for gold. Gold prices have continued to rise, but at a moderate pace, forming a rising wedge pattern that often signals the end of a strong trend. For gold bulls to remain optimistic, the metal must break through the upper trend line soon. It's too soon to dismiss inflation risk. Monetary policy is being eased globally, resulting in an increase in money supply growth once again.